I never thought I'd be standing outside my own son's wedding reception, staring at the guest list through tears I refused to let fall. The elegant cursive names blurred before my eyes as I scanned the paper again and again. My heart knew before my mind accepted it. My name wasn't there. I'm sorry. There must be some mistake, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm Barbara Thompson, mother of the groom. The young hostess with the clipboard looked uncomfortable, glancing behind her where my new daughter-in-law, Vanessa, stood in her flowing white gown, surrounded by her bridesmaids. I caught Vanessa's eye over the hostess's shoulder. Instead of surprise or concern, I saw something that chilled me to the bone: amusement. Vanessa excused herself from her friends and glided toward us, every inch the radiant bride. Her smile never reached her eyes as she approached. "Barbara," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. My name isn't on the guest list," I explained, still believing this was all a terrible error. Vanessa tilted her head slightly, her diamond earrings catching the light. "That's because you weren't invited to the reception. The ceremony was enough, don't you think?" Her smile widened as she saw my expression. "Your name is not on the list because I didn't put it there. 50 years of teaching elementary school children had taught me composure in the face of small cruelties. But nothing had prepared me for this moment. Behind Vanessa, I could see my son Michael in deep conversation with his new father-in-law, oblivious to what was happening at the entrance. "Does Michael know about this?" I asked quietly. "Michael understands that today is our day," Vanessa replied, dropping her voice. "We agreed that certain compromises were necessary. You had the ceremony. That's more than enough." I stood frozen, clutching my small beaded purse, the same one I'd carried when I married Michael's father 40 years ago. The weight of all those years, the sacrifices, the love poured into raising my son alone after his father died when Michael was just 12, crashed down on me. "I see," I managed to say, my dignity the only thing I had left to hold on to. "Please give Michael my congratulations." I turned to leave, my sensible low heels clicking softly on the marble floor of the Grand Avenue Hotel in downtown Chicago. "Barbara," Vanessa called after me, her voice loud enough that several guests turned to look. "We'll be sure to send you pictures." The laughter that followed me out the door would echo in my nightmares for months to come. I made it to my 10-year-old Toyota Corolla before the tears came. My hands shook so badly that I couldn't get the key into the ignition. How had things come to this? When had my sweet, considerate boy turned into a man who would allow his mother to be humiliated on his wedding day? As I sat there, memories flooded back. Michael's first steps across our small living room, his graduation from Northwestern, where I'd worked extra jobs to help with his tuition. The pride in his eyes when he landed his first position at Carter & Winthrop Financial. I remembered the day he'd introduced me to Vanessa 2 years ago, her smile dazzling but something calculating behind her eyes that I'd tried to ignore. "It's just pre-wedding nerves," my friend Diane had assured me last week when I confessed my worries about Vanessa's increasingly cold behavior. "Once they're married, things will settle down." But as I finally managed to start my car and pull away from the gleaming hotel where my son's new life was beginning without me, I knew with devastating certainty that things would not be getting better. The 3-bedroom house in Evanston where I'd lived for the past 30 years felt emptier than ever that night. I moved through the familiar rooms like a ghost, touching photographs of Michael through the years, fishing with his dad at Lake Michigan when he was 6, his high school graduation, the day he got his MBA. I hadn't always been alone. After my husband James died of a sudden heart attack, I'd thrown myself into giving Michael the best life possible. I'd worked as a 4th-grade teacher by day and took on tutoring jobs in the evenings. I'd postponed dating, turned down a department head position that would have required more travel, and put my own dreams of seeing the world on hold, all to ensure Michael never felt the absence of his father too keenly. Now, at 65, with retirement just months away after 4 decades of teaching, I found myself alone in a way I hadn't anticipated. I'd always imagined this time of my life would include Sunday dinners with Michael and his family, perhaps grandchildren to spoil, a gentle easing into my golden years surrounded by love. Instead, I had a son who had allowed his bride to exclude me from their wedding reception, and a daughter-in-law who seemed to take pleasure in my pain. The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. For a moment, hope fluttered. Maybe it was Michael calling to apologize, but the caller ID showed my sister Ellen's name. "How was the wedding?" she asked when I answered. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. Ellen had warned me about Vanessa from the beginning. "That girl is after his money and his connections," she'd said bluntly after meeting her at Christmas last year. "And she'll push you out the minute she gets a ring on her finger." It was beautiful, I lied, staring at the ceiling to keep fresh tears at bay. Michael looked so handsome in his tux. And the reception? Was the food as fancy as Vanessa kept bragging it would be? My throat closed up. I left early. Headache. Ellen was silent for a moment. "Barbara," she said finally, her voice gentle in a way that told me she knew I wasn't telling the truth. "What happened?" The dam broke. Between sobs, I told her everything. The missing name, Vanessa's cruel smile, Michael's absence during the whole humiliating scene. "That little witch," Ellen hissed when I finished. "And Michael, where was he when all this was happening?" "Talking with Vanessa's father. He works at Goldman Sachs, you know. Michael's been hoping to make connections there. So he sells out his mother for a business opportunity? The boy I helped you raise would never—" "Please, Ellen," I interrupted, suddenly exhausted. "I can't bear to think about it anymore tonight." After promising to call me tomorrow, Ellen hung up, leaving me alone with my thoughts again. I made myself a cup of tea and carried it to the back porch, where the summer evening had cooled to a pleasant temperature. The garden James and I had planted together all those years ago was in full bloom, hydrangeas and roses nodding in the gentle breeze. As I sipped my tea, I made a decision. I wouldn't let this break me. Whatever was happening with Michael and Vanessa, I would face it with the same strength that had carried me through widowhood and single motherhood. Tomorrow would be soon enough to figure out my next steps. But I couldn't have imagined then just how far Vanessa's cruelty would extend. Or that the wedding snub was just the beginning of a calculated campaign to separate me from my son, and eventually from the home I'd built with such care and sacrifice. The first real indication that something was seriously wrong came 3 weeks after the wedding. Michael and Vanessa had returned from their honeymoon in the Maldives, but I still hadn't heard from my son. Every call went to voicemail, every text received only brief, non-committal responses. I was trying to give them space, remembering how absorbed James and I had been in each other those first weeks of marriage. I was in my classroom, setting up for the fall semester that would begin in 2 weeks, when my cell phone rang. The screen showed First National Bank, which surprised me. I'd been banking there for decades without them ever calling me directly. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Carla Winters from First National. I'm calling because there's been an unusual request regarding your accounts, and we wanted to verify it with you directly before proceeding." My stomach tightened. "What kind of request?" "Someone attempted to add themselves as an authorized user on your checking and savings accounts. They had some of your personal information, but our security protocols flagged it for verification." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Who tried to access my accounts?" "A Mrs. Vanessa Thompson. She stated she was your daughter-in-law and that you had asked her to help manage your finances due to cognitive concerns." Carla's professional tone couldn't quite mask her discomfort. "She had your social security number and knew your mother's maiden name, but couldn't provide the security password." My hand gripped the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turned white. Cognitive concerns. I'd never been sharper in my life. And my social security number. How had Vanessa gotten that? Then I remembered the folder of financial documents I'd shown Michael last year when we'd discussed my retirement plans. He'd asked detailed questions about my pension, my savings, the house that was now fully paid off. At the time, I'd been touched by his interest in ensuring I'd be comfortable in retirement. "Mrs. Thompson, are you still there?" "Yes," I managed to say. "I absolutely did not authorize this. Please make a note on all my accounts that no one but me should have access." "Of course. We've already flagged your accounts for extra security. Would you like to change your passwords and security questions as well?" I'd recommend it. After spending nearly an hour updating all my security information, I sat in my empty classroom, surrounded by the cheerful posters and bookshelves that had been my professional home for so many years. What was Vanessa doing? And did Michael know about this? I tried calling him immediately, but once again reached his voicemail. This time I left a message. "Michael, it's Mom. Something very concerning has happened with the bank, and I need to speak with you as soon as possible. Please call me back today." He didn't call that day. Or the next. By the third day, my worry had hardened into something closer to anger. I decided to drive to their new condo in Lincoln Park after school. If Michael wouldn't come to me, I would go to him. The doorman at their luxury building called up to announce me. After a long wait, he informed me apologetically that Mrs. Thompson said they were on their way out to an appointment and couldn't see me. As I stood there trying to decide what to do next, I saw them, Michael and Vanessa, emerge from the elevator and cross the lobby. When Michael spotted me, shock registered on his face, quickly replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like guilt. "Mom, what are you doing here?" He hurried over, Vanessa trailing behind with obvious reluctance. "I've been trying to reach you for days," I said, keeping my voice level despite the hurt and anger churning inside me. "The bank called. Someone tried to access my accounts." Michael's eyes widened. But before he could respond, Vanessa stepped forward, sliding her arm through his. "We're running late for dinner with my parents," she said smoothly. "But I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding. The bank probably got confused." "The bank wasn't confused, Vanessa. They specifically said you tried to add yourself to my accounts and claimed I had cognitive concerns. Would you like to explain that?" Michael looked at his wife, confusion evident on his face. "Vanessa," for a moment her perfect composure slipped. "I was trying to help," she snapped. "Your mother's getting older, Michael. We discussed this. Remember how forgetful she was at Christmas, forgetting people's names, telling the same stories twice." I stared at her in disbelief. "I was exhausted from hosting 15 people and cooking for 3 days straight. And I mixed up your cousins' names once, Michael, because I'd just met them. Mom, let's not do this here." Michael glanced nervously at the doorman, who was politely pretending not to listen. "We'll call you tomorrow and sort this out." "Okay?" "No, Michael, it's not okay. Your wife tried to gain access to my life savings under false pretenses. I need to understand what's happening right now." Vanessa's expression hardened. "What's happening is that you're making a scene in our building, embarrassing us in front of people we have to see every day. This is exactly the kind of behavior that concerns us." "Us?" I looked at my son. "Michael, is this coming from both of you?" He wouldn't meet my eyes, and in that moment I felt something precious and fundamental shift between us. "Mom, we're really late," he said finally. "I'll call you tomorrow morning." "I promise." "Don't bother," I said quietly, dignity the only thing keeping me upright. "Unless you're calling to explain why your wife tried to steal from me, we have nothing to discuss." I walked out of the building with my back straight and my head high, waiting until I was safely in my car before allowing the tears to fall. How had my beautiful boy become this stranger, who would stand by while his wife attempted to take control of my finances. What had happened to the child I'd raised to value honesty and integrity above all else? And the call from Michael never came the next day. Instead, I received a formal letter from an attorney named Richard Brennan, informing me that he had been retained by Michael and Vanessa Thompson to discuss concerns about Barbara Thompson's capacity to manage her financial affairs. The letter went on to suggest a meeting to discuss voluntary guardianship options and asset protection strategies that would benefit all parties while ensuring Mrs. Thompson Sr.'s long-term care needs are met. I read the letter 3 times, each reading stoking my disbelief and anger. They were trying to take control of my money, my house, my life. And they were using the oldest trick in the book, claiming I was incompetent. My hands shaking with fury, I called my friend Diane, who had retired from teaching 2 years earlier. Her husband was an attorney specializing in elder law. Frank says don't respond to the letter and don't meet with them alone under any circumstances, Diane reported back after consulting with her husband. He says this reeks of financial elder abuse, and you need your own lawyer immediately. 2 days later, I sat across from Angela Martinez, an attorney Frank had recommended. Her office was smaller than I'd expected, but her credentials, displayed proudly on the wall behind her desk, were impressive. Unfortunately, what you're describing is something I see with increasing frequency, Angela said, after I'd explained the situation and shown her the letter. Adult children or their spouses become interested in their parents' assets as they approach retirement. The pattern usually starts with small things, checking on accounts to help, suggesting the parent might be confused or forgetful, isolating them from other family members or friends who might notice what's happening. But why now? I asked. I've always been generous with Michael. I helped with his college tuition, contributed to their wedding. I've never withheld anything from him. Angela studied me thoughtfully. How much is your estate worth, Mrs. Thompson? Approximately. I hesitated, not used to discussing my finances so openly. My house in Evanston is worth about $650,000 now. I have around $275,000 in retirement accounts and another $180,000 in savings and investments, plus my teacher's pension, which is about $4,200 a month. She nodded. So we're looking at assets of over $1 million plus steady income. That's more than enough to motivate someone with bad intentions. Has your relationship with your son changed recently? Perhaps since meeting his wife? The question hit home. He's been different since Vanessa, more distant, canceling plans at the last minute. But I thought it was just adjustment, new relationship, new priorities. And how long have they known each other? Just under 2 years. They got engaged quickly after about 6 months. Angela made notes on her legal pad. Did your son have financial troubles before meeting Vanessa? Debt issues, job instability, anything like that? I shook my head. No, he's always been financially responsible. He has a good job in finance, makes a very comfortable salary. What about Vanessa? What's her background? She works in luxury real estate, or did before the wedding. I'm not sure if she's continuing. She always talks about how successful she is, but... I hesitated. But, Angela prompted. Ellen, my sister, looked her up online once. She said Vanessa had only sold a few properties in the last couple of years. Nothing that would generate the kind of income she implies. Angela sat back in her chair. Mrs. Thompson, based on what you've told me, I believe we need to move quickly to protect you and your assets. This has all the hallmarks of a coordinated attempt to gain control of your finances. You really think Vanessa is behind this? Even saying it out loud felt like a betrayal of my son. I think it's highly suspicious that these financial maneuvers began immediately after their wedding. And the tactics, claiming cognitive issues, attempting account access, moving straight to legal intimidation, these are not the actions of concerned family members. These are the actions of someone who has done this before or has researched how to do it effectively. A chill ran through me. What do we do? First, we respond to their attorney making it absolutely clear that you are of sound mind and in complete control of your faculties and finances. We'll request any evidence they have of these alleged cognitive issues. There won't be any, of course. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Second, we need to protect your assets immediately. I'd recommend moving your accounts to a different bank entirely, one that Michael and Vanessa don't know about. We should also discuss putting your house in a trust that protects it from any claims they might make. Is all that really necessary? The thought of such drastic measures against my own son made my chest ache. Mrs. Thompson, I've seen cases like this go very badly, very quickly. People lose their homes, their life savings, even their independence. I don't want to frighten you, but this is serious. Whatever is motivating your son and his wife, they've already shown they're willing to take significant steps to gain control of your finances. I nodded slowly. Reality sinking in. What else should we do? Document everything, every interaction, every call, every text. Get a medical evaluation that clearly establishes your cognitive health. We want that on record before they try to force their own evaluation. And, she hesitated, and what? You should consider installing security cameras at your home and changing your locks. In situations like this, it's not uncommon for the parties seeking control to help themselves to financial documents, checkbooks, or valuables during supposedly friendly visits. I left Angela's office with a comprehensive plan and a sick feeling in my stomach. This wasn't some stranger trying to scam me. This was my son, my only child, the person I loved more than anyone in the world. That night I sat in my garden as the sun set, surrounded by the plants James and I had lovingly tended together. I thought about the boy who had once brought me dandelions clutched in his small fist, who had cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend broke his heart, who had stood tall and strong beside me at his father's funeral. How had we come to this? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? The next morning, I called my sister Ellen in Arizona. I'm coming to visit, I announced when she answered. Barbara, is everything okay? You sound strange. I glanced at the letter from Michael's attorney, which I'd read so many times I practically knew it by heart. No, everything is not okay, but I'm working on it. Can I stay with you for a week or two? I need to get away and think. Of course you can stay, as long as you need, but you're scaring me, Barb. What's going on with Michael? It's a long story. I'll tell you everything when I get there. 2 days later, with my most important documents and valuables locked in a safe deposit box at a new bank and security cameras discreetly installed around my property, I boarded a flight to Phoenix. The dry heat hit me like a wall as I exited the airport terminal. But Ellen's familiar face was a welcome sight. You've lost weight, she said immediately, hugging me tight. And you look exhausted. Let's get you home, and you can tell me everything. Ellen's adobe-style house in Scottsdale was cool and quiet, with spectacular views of the mountains. Over the next few days, I slept better than I had in weeks, took long walks in the early mornings before the heat became unbearable, and gradually told Ellen everything that had happened. I knew that girl was trouble the moment I met her. Ellen fumed. The way she kept showing off her designer bag and dropping names of all the important people she knows. But I never thought she'd go this far, or that Michael would go along with it. That's what I can't understand, I admitted, watching a hummingbird hover near Ellen's feeder. How could my son do this to me, after everything we've been through together? Ellen's expression softened. People can be manipulated. Barb, especially when they're in love. Michael always did want to please everyone. Remember how hard he tried with James's parents, even when they were being completely unreasonable? I nodded, remembering my late husband's difficult, demanding parents, who had never thought I was good enough for their son. Michael had spent years trying to win their approval, long after I had given up. Maybe Vanessa's playing on that. His desire to keep the peace, to make everyone happy. Plus, she's probably feeding him stories constantly about how you're slipping, forgetting things, making poor decisions. But he knows me. How could he possibly believe that? Ellen sighed. Because he wants to believe the best of his wife. And maybe... She hesitated. Maybe what? Maybe a small part of him is tempted by the money too. Not because he's greedy like Vanessa, but because it would solve problems for him. You know how much pressure these young couples put on themselves. The right address, the right schools for future kids, the right vacations and cars and clothes. If he's trying to keep up with Vanessa's expectations, having access to your assets might seem like a solution. The thought hurt, but it made a certain horrible sense. Michael had always been ambitious, driven to succeed. Had that drive morphed into something darker under Vanessa's influence? While I was in Arizona, Michael called twice. Both times, following my lawyer's advice, I let the calls go to voicemail. His messages were a mixture of concern and irritation. "Mom, where are you? I went by the house and you weren't there." And later, "Mom, this is ridiculous. Call me back. We need to talk about this situation with the lawyer. It's for your own good." I texted back only, "I'm safe and taking some time away. Please direct any communications to my attorney, Angela Martinez." I included her contact information and nothing else. The response came within minutes. "You hired a lawyer? Mom, what's gotten into you? We're trying to help." I didn't respond. By the time I returned to Evanston 2 weeks later, I felt stronger and clearer about what needed to happen. Angela had been busy in my absence, sending a forceful response to Michael's attorney, along with a report from a neurological specialist, confirming that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment. She had also discovered something disturbing. "Mrs. Thompson," she said when I visited her office the day after my return, "I had my paralegal do some digging into Vanessa's background. She's done this before." I stared at her. "Done what before?" "Financial manipulation of family members. 3 years ago, her elderly uncle Bernard Miller changed his will to leave his entire estate to her, cutting out his children entirely. He died 6 months later. The children contested the will, claiming undue influence, but the court upheld it. Vanessa walked away with just over $800,000. My stomach dropped. That could be a coincidence. Maybe she was close to her uncle. Perhaps. But there's more. 5 years ago, she was briefly engaged to a widower named Robert Gaines. During their engagement, she was added to his bank accounts and investment portfolio as a joint owner. When the engagement ended, allegedly because his adult children intervened, she refused to remove herself from the accounts. It took a lawsuit to resolve it. Did Michael know about any of this? Angela shook her head. That I don't know. But it establishes a pattern of behavior that strengthens our position considerably. I left her office feeling both vindicated and deeply sad. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust and family and the future I'd imagined for myself and my son. All of it now lay in ruins. When I pulled into my driveway, a familiar car was parked at the curb, Michael's black Audi. He was sitting on my porch steps, his expression unreadable. For a moment I considered driving away, but this was my home, my sanctuary. I wouldn't be driven away from it. "Mom," he said as I approached, standing up quickly. He looked tired, I noticed, with dark circles under his eyes. "Finally, where have you been? I've been worried sick." "I told you I was safe," I replied coolly, unlocking my front door. After a moment's hesitation, I added, "You can come in, but only if we can have a civil conversation." He followed me inside, looking around as if checking for changes. "You've installed security cameras," he noted, spotting one of the discreet devices near the front door. "Yes." I set my purse down on the hall table. "Would you like some iced tea?" In the kitchen, an uncomfortable silence stretched between us as I poured 2 glasses and added lemon slices. This man who looked so much like his father, who had once been the center of my world, now felt like a stranger. "Why did you hire a lawyer, Mom?" he finally asked, accepting the glass I offered. "Why did you?" I countered. He shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't my idea. Vanessa's father suggested it. He said it was the responsible thing to do, making sure your affairs are in order before there might be problems." "What problems, Michael? I'm in perfect health, mentally and physically. I'm not even fully retired yet." "People can decline quickly at your age," he said, not meeting my eyes. Vanessa's grandmother had dementia. One day she was fine. The next day she was putting her keys in the freezer and forgetting her own daughter's name. "So, based on a story about a woman I've never met, you decided I needed to hand control of my finances over to you and your wife of less than a month?" The hurt and anger I'd been suppressing rose to the surface. The same wife who tried to access my bank accounts without my knowledge, who excluded me from your wedding reception. Michael's head snapped up. "What are you talking about? You left the reception early. Vanessa said you weren't feeling well." I stared at him, realization dawning. "Is that what she told you?" "Michael," I was turned away at the door. "My name wasn't on the guest list. Vanessa told me to my face that I wasn't invited to the reception." Confusion crossed his features. That can't be right. She wouldn't do that." "She did. Just like she tried to add herself to my bank accounts claiming I had cognitive concerns. Just like she apparently did with her Uncle Bernard and her ex-fiancé Robert." His face paled. "How do you know those names?" My attorney investigated Vanessa's background. This isn't her first attempt at financial manipulation, Michael. He stood up abruptly, pacing across my kitchen floor. "You're twisting everything. Vanessa loves me. She wants what's best for our family. And what about what's best for me?" "Did either of you consider that?" "Of course we did. We want to protect you, make sure you're taken care of. By taking control of my house, my savings, the money I worked 60-hour weeks to set aside?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "I tutored other people's children on weekends so you could have braces. Michael, I skipped vacations and drove old cars and wore second-hand clothes so you could go to Northwestern instead of community college. Everything I have, I earned through decades of hard work and sacrifice, most of it for you." Michael stopped pacing, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "And now you're throwing that in my face? Holding it over me that you did what parents are supposed to do? What about what I need now, Mom? Vanessa and I want to start a family. We need a bigger place. Do you know how expensive childcare is in Chicago? Private school tuition?" I felt as if I'd been slapped. "So this is about money. You and Vanessa decided my retirement savings would solve your financial problems." "It's not like that," he protested, but his eyes slid away from mine. "We just thought it would be better for everyone if we managed things. You wouldn't have to worry about bills or investments or house maintenance. We could help you downsize to somewhere more manageable." "More manageable," I repeated. "You mean somewhere cheaper, so you could access the equity in this house? The house where you grew up. The house your father and I bought together." Michael had the grace to look ashamed, but he rallied quickly. "Real estate in Evanston is valuable. This place is too big for one person anyway. It's the smart financial move, Mom." "Smart for whom?" I asked quietly. "Not for me. This is my home. These are my neighbors, my community. My garden that your father and I planted together is out back. My classroom is 5 minutes away. Everything and everyone I know and love is here." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. "You're being irrational. This is exactly why we're concerned." "No, Michael. I'm being completely rational. I'm protecting myself from financial exploitation by my own son and his wife. His face hardened. If that's how you want to see it, fine. But you should know, we're not backing down. Dad would have wanted me to make sure you're taken care of properly. The mention of James, my beloved husband, my partner for 20 years, pushed me over the edge. Don't you dare invoke your father in this. James would be ashamed of what you're doing. He taught you better than this. Michael flinched as if I'd struck him. I'm doing what needs to be done, he said, his voice cold. Our lawyer will be in touch. He strode towards the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. This isn't over, Mom. After he left, I sank into a kitchen chair, trembling with emotion. The confrontation had gone even worse than I'd feared. There was no misunderstanding to clear up, no explanation that would make sense of what was happening. My son and his wife wanted my money, and they were willing to declare me incompetent to get it. I called Angela immediately and recounted the conversation. She listened carefully, asking a few clarifying questions. This actually gives us more to work with, she said when I finished. He essentially admitted their motives were financial, not concerned for your welfare. I'll add this to our documentation. What happens now? I asked. Exhaustion setting in. Now we prepare for them to escalate. Based on Michael's parting words, they're not giving up. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. What came next was a formal petition for guardianship, filed with the court the following week. Michael and Vanessa were requesting that the court appoint them as my guardians, with full control over my person and property, on the grounds that I was unable to manage my financial affairs and personal care due to cognitive decline consistent with early-stage dementia. The document described incidents that had either never happened or were grossly distorted. Claiming I had left burners on and nearly caused a fire, I had never done so. In cash, at the contractor's request. They're lying, I whispered, horrified as Angela walked me through the petition in her office. None of this is true. I know, she said grimly. Unfortunately, this is standard procedure in these cases. They're building a narrative of incapacity, using whatever they can twist or fabricate to support it. But how can they just make things up? Won't the court see through this? The court will appoint an investigator to evaluate these claims and your capacity. That's why the medical evaluation we already obtained is so important. It establishes a baseline of your cognitive health from a neutral third party. Over the next few weeks, my life became a bizarre mix of normalcy and nightmare. By day, I taught my 4th grade class as I had for decades, guiding young minds through the wonders of science and mathematics. By evening, I met with lawyers, neurologists, and court-appointed evaluators, all to prove I was of sound mind and should maintain control over my own life. The court investigator, a kind but thorough woman named Mrs. Reynolds, spent an afternoon with me, observing me in my home, asking detailed questions about my daily routines, my finances, my health care, and my social connections. Mrs. Thompson, she said as our session concluded, I want to be transparent with you. Based on our interaction today and the medical evaluations in your file, I see no evidence whatsoever of cognitive impairment or inability to manage your affairs. In fact, you appear to be extraordinarily capable and well organized. Relief flooded through me. Thank you for saying so. She hesitated. However, I should warn you that guardianship cases can become quite contentious. Your son and daughter-in-law have submitted affidavits from several people claiming to have witnessed concerning behavior. What people? Who would say such things about me? Vanessa's parents, for one, a neighbor named Caroline Winters, and someone identified as your family physician, Dr. Martin. I gasped. Caroline barely knows me. We've spoken maybe twice in the 5 years she's lived on this street. And Dr. Martin isn't my doctor. I've seen Dr. Susan Chen for the past 15 years. Dr. Martin is Vanessa's uncle. Mrs. Reynolds made careful notes. This is very helpful information, Mrs. Thompson. Rest assured, I will include all of this in my report to the court." When she left, I called Angela immediately to relay the conversation. "They're bringing false witnesses against me," I said, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "Vanessa's parents, her uncle pretending to be my doctor, how can they do this?" "This confirms what I suspected," Angela replied. "Vanessa is orchestrating this entire process, and she's bringing in her family to support the narrative. This isn't just opportunistic, it's calculated and coordinated. Will the judge believe them over me? Not if we can help it. I'll subpoena your actual medical records from Dr. Chen, and we'll ask her to testify about your health status. We'll also need character witnesses, colleagues, friends, people who interact with you regularly and can speak to your competence." The hearing was scheduled for October 15th, 6 weeks away. As the date approached, I found myself withdrawing from social activities, reluctant to face well-meaning questions about my absence from Michael's life, or worse, pitying looks from those who had heard rumors about the guardianship petition. Ellen flew in from Arizona to stay with me the week before the hearing. Having her in the house was a comfort I hadn't realized how desperately I needed. "You're doing the right thing," she assured me as we sat on the back porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Standing up for yourself, fighting back. But at what cost, Ellen? Even if I win, I've lost my son. Our relationship may never recover from this." Ellen took my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Barb, you didn't create this situation. Michael and Vanessa did. Whatever happens, remember that. You're just protecting what's rightfully yours, your independence, your home, the future you worked so hard to secure." The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through my house in the dark, touching familiar objects, the quilt my grandmother had made, the framed photograph of James holding newborn Michael, the collection of shells from our family vacation to Florida when Michael was 10. Each item held memories, a piece of the life I had built with such care. In my son's old bedroom, now converted to a guest room but still containing some of his childhood treasures, basketball trophies, science fair ribbons, the model airplane he and his father had built together. I sat on the edge of the bed and allowed myself to cry for everything that had been lost. The courthouse was imposing, all marble and echoing hallways. Angela met us at the entrance, elegant in a navy suit, her briefcase bulging with documents. Ellen squeezed my hand before taking a seat in the visitor section, while I followed Angela to the respondents' table. Across the aisle, Michael sat beside a silver-haired man I assumed was Richard Brennan, his attorney. Vanessa sat directly behind them, immaculately dressed in a conservative beige suit, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun. When our eyes met, she gave me a small, triumphant smile that sent chills down my spine. Judge Carolyn Porter, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, entered and called the court to order. As the proceedings began, I felt oddly detached, as if watching a play about someone else's life. Richard Brennan presented their case first, painting a picture of a declining widow whose grief and isolation had accelerated her cognitive deterioration. "Mrs. Thompson may present well for short periods," he said smoothly. "But those closest to her, her son and daughter-in-law, have observed alarming patterns of forgetfulness, poor judgment, and paranoia that put her at risk." One by one, their witnesses testified. Vanessa's father, looking appropriately concerned as he described how I had seemed confused at family gatherings. Caroline Winters, who claimed she had seen me wandering in my bathrobe at midnight, a complete fabrication. And finally, Dr. Martin, who spoke with professional authority about symptoms consistent with early-stage dementia that he had allegedly observed. When it was Angela's turn, she methodically dismantled their case. She presented my clean neurological evaluations, testimony from Dr. Chen about my excellent health, and statements from colleagues at school about my continued sharp performance in the classroom. She called the court investigator, who firmly stated she had found no evidence of incapacity, and my principal, who described me as one of our most organized and effective teachers, whose evaluations from parents and administrators have been consistently outstanding. But Angela's masterstroke came when she called her final witness, Bernard Miller, Jr., the son of Vanessa's uncle. "Mr. Miller," Angela began, "could you please tell the court about your experience with Vanessa Lewis, now Vanessa Thompson, regarding your father's estate?" Michael's head snapped up at this, his expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. Vanessa, I noticed, had gone very still. Bernard Miller, a tired-looking man in his 50s, recounted how Vanessa had ingratiated herself with his elderly father, gradually isolating him from his children and convincing him to change his will in her favor. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. Dad died believing we had abandoned him, when in reality, Vanessa had manufactured conflicts and blocked our access to him. Next came Robert Gaines, Vanessa's former fiancé, who testified about how she had manipulated her way onto his accounts and then refused to relinquish access when their relationship ended. She threatened to claim I had been abusive if I didn't let her keep access to the funds, he stated flatly. It cost me over $30,000 in legal fees to remove her from my accounts. Throughout these testimonies, I watched Michael's face. His initial skepticism gave way to doubt, then visible distress, as the pattern of Vanessa's behavior became impossible to ignore. Once he turned to look at his wife, only to find her staring straight ahead, her expression now carefully blank. When all testimony had been presented, Judge Porter called a brief recess. Angela leaned over to me. "You're doing great," she whispered. "The judge is paying close attention to everything, especially the pattern evidence about Vanessa. I think we're in good shape." When the court reconvened, Judge Porter delivered her ruling without preamble. "Having reviewed all evidence and testimony presented in this matter, I find no basis whatsoever for the establishment of guardianship over Barbara Thompson. All medical evidence indicates she is of sound mind and fully capable of managing her affairs." Relief washed over me, but the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I find the petitioner's claims troubling in light of the pattern evidence presented regarding previous financial manipulations by Vanessa Thompson. This court is deeply concerned that this petition may represent an attempt at financial exploitation of an elder, which is a serious matter." She fixed Michael and Vanessa with a stern gaze. "The petition for guardianship is denied. Additionally, I am issuing a protective order prohibiting Michael and Vanessa Thompson from making any further attempts to access Mrs. Barbara Thompson's finances or property without her explicit written consent. Any violation of this order will result in contempt charges." She banged her gavel, and it was over. We had won. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Ellen hugged me tightly, tears streaming down both our faces. "It's over, Barb. You did it." Over her shoulder, I saw Michael standing alone, looking lost. Vanessa was nowhere to be seen. Our eyes met across the crowded hallway, and after a moment's hesitation, he walked toward me. "Mom," he said, his voice rough with emotion. I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say right now, Michael," I replied quietly. "Too much has happened." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand. But I want you to know I didn't realize." He stopped, seemingly unable to find the right words. "I'm sorry," he finally managed, the words barely audible. "I know you are," I said, and I did know. I could see the shame and regret written plainly on his face. My son had been manipulated, used as a tool in Vanessa's scheme. That didn't excuse his actions, but it helped explain them. "You should go. We'll talk another time." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "Michael." He looked back. hope flashing briefly in his eyes. "Be careful," I said simply. In the months that followed, life gradually returned to a new normal. I completed my final semester of teaching, retiring with a celebration attended by colleagues, former students, and friends. I traveled with Ellen to Italy, finally taking the European trip I'd dreamed about for decades. I volunteered at the local library, reading to children twice a week. Michael and I spoke occasionally, brief, careful conversations that skirted around the painful subject that had divided us. He and Vanessa had separated, he told me during one call. He had filed for divorce after discovering she had opened credit cards in his name without his knowledge. The healing between us would take time, if it happened at all. Some wounds cut too deep for simple forgiveness. But as spring arrived and I planted new flowers in the garden James and I had started so many years ago, I found myself looking forward rather than back. I had faced the worst betrayal imaginable, an attempt by my own child to declare me incompetent and take everything I had worked for, and I had emerged stronger, more confident in my own resilience. Whatever the future held, I would face it on my terms. In my own home, with the independence I had fought so hard to protect. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.